Most people know GHK-Cu for one thing: cosmetic benefits, skin, collagen, wrinkles, hair, maybe wound healing. And if that's where your understanding of GHK-Cu stops, you're missing what may be the most fascinating part of this peptide. Because when researchers started looking deeper at what GHK actually does to cellular biology, they found something much bigger. Genes involved in DNA repair turned on. Genes involved in clearing damaged proteins turned on. Inflammatory signaling change, stem cell associated markers increase. Nerve growth and neurotrophic signaling increase. And suddenly, we're not talking about a cosmetic peptide anymore. We're talking about a molecule that appears capable of influencing some of the fundamental biological programs involved in repair, regeneration, and cellular maintenance. So today, we're going considerably deeper than collagen. Can GHK-Cu actually influence DNA repair? What does it do to cellular machinery responsible for cleaning up damaged proteins? What happens to inflammatory signaling? Can it influence stem cell behavior? What about damaged nerves? And when you pull all of those mechanisms together, does GHK-Cu deserve to be viewed as one of the most interesting regenerative peptides in longevity? Let's find out. What's up, everybody? I'm Kareem Haskett, a certified biohacking coach and longevity and performance consultant. On this channel, we break down the physiology behind peptides, hormones, performance, recovery, metabolic health, and longevity, so you understand not simply what something does, but why it works. Quickly, before we get into it, if you're wondering where I source the compounds I discuss, I use 3 pathways: physician-prescribed pharmaceutical compounds through a telehealth platform and 503A compounding pharmacy, bioactive precision peptides that are broken down small enough to survive digestion, and a trusted research source for compounds unavailable through my telehealth or bioactive platforms. You can access all 3 through my website at kareemoptimize.com. Link is in the description. And as always, this content is for educational purposes only and should never be considered medical advice. Peptides, hormones, prescription therapies, and other compounds should be evaluated with an appropriately qualified healthcare professional based on your individual health status, medications, contraindications, and goals. Now, let's talk about the peptide most people drastically underestimate. First, what exactly is GHK-Cu? GHK stands for Glycyl-Histidyl-L-Lysine. 3 amino acids, that's it. It's a naturally occurring tripeptide found in human plasma and other biological fluids. And GHK has an unusually strong affinity for copper. Bind copper to it, and you get the copper complex we call GHK-Cu. And copper isn't just along for the ride. Copper participates in numerous biological processes involved in tissue repair, antioxidant defense, extracellular matrix formation, and enzymatic activity. GHK essentially provides a biological mechanism for binding and delivering copper in ways that can influence repair signaling. And here's where the longevity conversation begins. GHK concentrations appear to decline with age. So we have a naturally occurring signaling peptide associated with repair whose abundance decreases as we get older, during the same period when our ability to repair tissue also declines. Interesting coincidence. Biology apparently enjoys subtlety, but the reason GHK-Cu became famous had nothing to do with DNA. It was the skin. GHK-Cu has long been associated with collagen synthesis, elastin, glycosaminoglycans, fibroblast function, angiogenesis, wound healing, and extracellular matrix remodeling. That's why copper peptides exploded in skincare, and none of that is trivial. Your extracellular matrix is literally part of the structural environment that allows tissues to function. But here's the problem. Calling GHK-Cu a skin peptide because it improves collagen is a little like calling your smartphone a calculator. Technically correct, wildly incomplete. because when researchers started examining gene expression, the conversation changed dramatically. The conversation shifted toward GHK-Cu and DNA repair. Your DNA gets damaged constantly. Oxidative stress, normal metabolism, radiation, environmental exposure, replication errors, inflammation. Every day your cells are dealing with molecular damage that has to be recognized and repaired. Fortunately, you have an entire network of genes dedicated to doing exactly that. And this is where GHK becomes fascinating. Researchers examining gene expression databases identify 52 DNA repair associated genes significantly influenced by GHK. 47 were upregulated, only 5 were downregulated. Let that sink in. This tiny 3 amino acid peptide was associated with a broad transcriptional shift toward DNA repair machinery, and some individual changes were substantial. PARP3 increased approximately 253%, POM increased approximately 225%, MRE11A increased approximately 212%. Those aren't random alphabet soup genes. PARP3 participates in DNA damage response and repair. POM is a DNA polymerase involved in repairing double-strand breaks. MRE11A is part of the mRNA complex involved in detecting and processing damaged DNA. Now, GHK-Cu isn't a tiny mechanic crawling inside the nucleus with a molecular wrench and repairing your DNA itself, although that would make a fantastic thumbnail. As a matter of fact, it is the thumbnail. What's potentially happening is more interesting scientifically. GHK appears capable of changing the transcriptional environment controlling the machinery that performs DNA repair. That's an important distinction. The peptide isn't necessarily the repairman, but it may be influencing the instructions given to the repair crew. And there's another clue. Researchers have also looked at human fibroblast damage by radiation. Radiation damages DNA and can impair cellular replication. In cultured primary human dermal fibroblasts obtained from patients who had undergone radiation therapy, exposure to GHK-Cu restored population doubling behavior toward normal and increased production of basic fibroblast growth factor and VEGF compared with untreated irradiated cells. Again, don't jump from that to GHK-Cu reverses radiation damage in humans. That's not what this experiment demonstrated. But biologically, it gives us another clue. When cells are placed under significant damage, GHK-Cu appears capable of pushing aspects of cellular behavior toward repair and restoration. And DNA isn't the only damaged material your cells have to deal with. Proteins break too, which brings us to something almost nobody talks about: the cellular garbage disposal. Inside every cell is a quality control system called the Ubiquitin-Proteasome system. We'll call it the UPS because this video clearly doesn't have enough acronyms. And no, this UPS isn't delivering your Amazon package. This one takes out the trash. Proteins become damaged, misfolded, dysfunctional. The cell needs a way to identify them, tag them, and destroy them before they accumulate and interfere with cellular function. That's the Ubiquitin-Proteasome system. Think of ubiquitin as the molecular sticker saying, this thing is trash, trash. And the proteasome is the recycling machinery that breaks it down. Here's why longevity researchers care. Proteostasis, the ability to maintain healthy proteins, is one of the fundamental problems of aging. As protein quality control systems become less efficient, damaged proteins accumulate. And once again, GHK shows up. Gene expression analysis found GHK increased expression of 41 genes associated with the Ubiquitin-Proteasome system, while suppressing only 1. Some of those changes were enormous. USP29 increased more than tenfold in that dataset. Multiple ubiquitin ligases, conjugated enzymes, and proteasome components were also upregulated. Now we're starting to see a pattern. GHK-Cu may not simply help the body build new tissue. It appears to influence the machinery responsible for removing damaged cellular material first. Think of renovating a house. You don't just walk into a damaged building and start installing new countertops. You remove the broken drywall, clear the debris, repair the wiring, then rebuild. GHK-Cu appears to influence biology on both sides of that equation: cleanup and reconstruction. Now add in the inflammation benefits. Repair doesn't happen properly when inflammatory signaling remains chronically elevated. Acute inflammation is useful. You get injured, the immune system responds, repair begins, problem solved. But chronic inflammatory signaling is different. That's like calling the fire department and then having them live in your kitchen spraying the house indefinitely. Sheesh. Eventually, the response becomes part of the problem. One inflammatory pathway repeatedly associated with GHK is NF-kappa B. NF-kappa B is a major transcriptional regulator of inflammatory signaling. GHK has demonstrated anti-inflammatory activity across experimental systems, including suppression of inflammatory mediators and effects involving cytokines such as IL-6. And IL-6 isn't inherently bad. Context matters. Exercise can transiently increase IL-6 and produce beneficial metabolic signaling, but chronically elevated pro-inflammatory signaling is an entirely different physiological environment. And that's where GHK-Cu's broader profile becomes interesting, because now we potentially have damage recognition and repair, damaged protein clearance, inflammatory modulation, extracellular matrix reconstruction. That's not four random benefits. Those are interconnected stages of tissue recovery. And we're still not done, because there's GHK-Cu and stem cell biology to talk about as well. Eventually, repairing tissue requires cells capable of producing new cells. Enter P63. P63 is a transcription factor with an important role in maintaining proliferative potential. In human skin equivalent experiments, GHK-Cu increased expression of stem cell associated markers, including P63 and integrins in basal keratinocytes. In plain English, GHK-Cu appeared to help maintain characteristics associated with cells that retain the capacity to keep dividing and regenerating tissue. That's a big deal. But let's keep the biology where the biology actually is. That doesn't mean somebody injected GHK-Cu and suddenly activated every stem cell throughout their body. This isn't a Marvel origin story. The P63 findings we're discussing are specifically tied to epidermal basal cell biology. But conceptually, this adds another piece to the regenerative puzzle, because effective tissue regeneration requires more than collagen. You need viable cells, you need proliferative capacity, you need extracellular matrix, you need vascular support, you need controlled inflammation, and you need damaged material cleared away. GHK-Cu touches an extraordinary number of those systems, which brings us to perhaps my favorite part of this entire discussion. Can GHK-Cu help regenerate nerves? Now things get really interesting, because connective tissue can heal beautifully, but if proper innervation doesn't return, the tissue isn't fully restored. Experimental research has found that GHK can stimulate nerve outgrowth, and in animal nerve injury models, GHK-Cu increased production of nerve growth factor, or NGF, Neurotrophin 3, and Neurotrophin 4. Researchers also observed accelerated nerve fiber regeneration, increased axon counts, and increased Schwann cell proliferation compared with controls. Schwann cells are particularly important because they support peripheral nerves and participate heavily in repair after nerve injury. So now we're not simply talking about, does this peptide help wounds close faster? We're asking whether the regenerative environment it creates can also support restoration of the neural infrastructure inside healing tissue. That's a completely different level of regeneration. And I want to correct something you may hear online. You may see this presented as brand new 2026 clinical evidence of GHK-Cu regenerating human nerves. That's not what the current literature shows. The nerve regeneration work is predominantly experimental and preclinical. What is happening is that modern clinical investigation is beginning to catch up with decades of regenerative biology, and that's worth watching. Now let's put the whole picture together. Alright, so this is where I think people misunderstand GHK-Cu. They look at every mechanism separately. Collagen, cool. DNA repair, cool. Proteasome, cool. NGF, cool. But biology doesn't operate as a list of Instagram bullet points. Look at the sequence. Damaged DNA needs repair machinery. Damaged proteins need removal. Excessive inflammation needs resolution. New extracellular matrix needs to be constructed. Blood vessels need to support healing tissue. Regenerative cells need to retain proliferative capacity. And nerves may need to reestablish functional connections. That's a regenerative program. And GHK-Cu appears to interact with multiple components of that program. That's why I think calling it merely a collagen peptide dramatically undersells the biology. But is it really the ultimate peptide for DNA repair? Here's my answer. Not exactly. And the reason actually makes GHK-Cu more interesting, not less. If you describe GHK-Cu as a peptide that simply repairs DNA, you're reducing an extraordinary broad biological signal to one mechanism. The more interesting possibility is that GHK-Cu acts as something closer to a regenerative signaling coordinator. It influences gene expression associated with DNA repair. It influences protein quality control machinery. It influences inflammatory signaling. It stimulates extracellular matrix remodeling. It promotes angiogenic signaling during appropriate stages of healing. It interacts with basal cell proliferative biology. And experimental work suggests neurotrophic and nerve regenerative activity. That is a much bigger story than GHK-Cu fixes DNA. So if you're asking whether GHK-Cu is the ultimate DNA repair peptide, I'd say DNA repair is one chapter. Regeneration is the book. So what does this all mean for longevity? Now, this is where we arrive at the practical reason I care about this peptide. Longevity isn't simply living longer. It's maintaining functional tissue longer. Skin, connective tissue, muscle supporting structures, vascular networks, nervous tissue, organs, the entire biological infrastructure that allows you to continue functioning. Aging involves progressive accumulation of damage, DNA damage, protein damage, extracellular matrix deterioration, chronic inflammatory signaling, declining regenerative capacity. GHK-Cu is fascinating because its known biology intersects with multiple components of that deterioration simultaneously. That doesn't make it an immortality peptide. If it did, I'd have ended this video 10 minutes ago and started buying beachfront property for the year 2200, because you better believe it's in my stack. But it does make GHK-Cu one of the more biological interesting compounds in regenerative and longevity research. Now, you can't talk about GHK-Cu without talking about topical versus local versus systemic. And that distinction matters, because people talk about using GHK-Cu as though every administration route is accomplishing exactly the same thing. They're not necessarily equivalent. Topical GHK-Cu makes intuitive sense when the target is the skin. You're putting a compound directly where you're trying to influence dermal remodeling. That's also where much of the human experience and clinical investigation has historically been concentrated. Then you have local or tissue-directed approaches, where the objective is concentrated exposure around a particular area of concern. And finally, systemic administration. That's where the longevity conversation becomes considerably more ambitious. Because if you're proposing systemic GHK-Cu for the whole body regenerative signaling, you're extrapolating much further beyond the human clinical literature. The mechanistic rationale is fascinating. The accumulated experimental biology is extensive, but administration route changes exposure, distribution, metabolism, and ultimately what biological effects you can reasonably expect. So I would never pretend topical GHK-Cu, local GHK-Cu, and systemic GHK-Cu are simply three interchangeable ways of accomplishing exactly the same thing. They're different strategies, built around different objectives. Here's what I want you to remember. GHK-Cu became famous because people could visually see what it did. Better looking skin is visible. Improved wound healing is visible. Collagen remodeling is visible. But some of the most interesting biology associated with GHK-Cu is invisible. You can't look in the mirror and see part 3 expression. You can't watch the Ubiquitin-Proteasome system tagging damaged proteins. You can't see NF-kappa B signaling change. You can't see P63 expression. You can't watch NGF signaling occur. But those processes may ultimately tell us far more about GHK-Cu than wrinkles ever did. Because the real question isn't, can GHK-Cu make skin look younger? The deeper question is, can GHK-Cu help damaged tissue behave more like healthy tissue? And that is where the peptide becomes incredibly interesting. So, is GHK-Cu the ultimate peptide for DNA repair? I wouldn't crown it based on DNA repair alone. But if you ask me whether GHK-Cu belongs in a conversation about regenerative biology and longevity, absolutely. Because we're looking at a peptide associated with DNA repair gene expression, protein quality control, inflammatory regulation, collagen and extracellular matrix remodeling, angiogenesis, basal cell proliferative signaling, neurotrophic factors, and nerve generation. One mechanism is interesting. Multiple mechanisms converging on the same biological objective? That's where I started paying attention. GHK-Cu isn't interesting because it does one spectacular thing. It's interesting because so many of its signals appear to point in the same direction. Repair the damage, clear what shouldn't be there, control the inflammatory environment, then rebuild. That's not skincare, that's regenerative biology. And if you found this breakdown useful, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, were you already looking at GHK-Cu as a systemic regenerative peptide, or did you still primarily think of it as a skin and collagen peptide? And if you want to explore the peptides, pharmaceutical pathways, bioactive compounds, and optimization strategies I discuss, head over to my website, KareemOptimize.com. That's where you can explore the different pathways I use and learn more about the compounds and strategies that may align with your performance, recovery, cognitive, body composition, and longevity goals. And if you want a starting point built specifically around your goals, you can request your free personalized protocol. Fill out the short questionnaire and I'll build the strategy around you. The goal isn't more compounds, it's the right compounds for the right objective and the right strategy. Everything starts at KareemOptimize.com. I'm Kareem Haskett. Stay informed, stay intentional, keep optimizing.